Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video we're gonna go over the concept of functions. Now imagine you have some code inside your program that you repeat over and over again, right? And you write this code everywhere in your program and you keep repeating it, and you just wish that there's a way to write it once and then you don't have to write it again. Well, that's what functions are for. We start by writing def, so this lets the Python interpreter know that we're creating a function. And now let's give it a name, for example my function1, or just my function for now, right? And parentheses and then 2 points and the pass that I use as a placeholder. So this is the input of a function. You write def, letting the interpreter know that this is a function. The function name, usually if it's a long function name, we capitalize the first letter of each word, and it's telling me that there's an error. Function name should be lowercase. Let's make it ignore errors like these in case the function name is very long. And we have the parentheses, which will be explained later, and then 2 dots, and then the function body. So just like the if and the for loop, you have to pay attention for the indentation. So let's say this function will print the word hello world, and there we go, right? So now if we run this file, nothing's gonna happen, right? Because this is how functions work. You wanna call the function, the Python interpreter will read the function and then it will store it, but nothing's gonna happen. So we're gonna have to do this, my function, and then call it. Now if we run, there we go, we have printed hello world. So you have to call the function name, right? And this comes in handy by just writing it more than once, and you don't have to write the entire code inside of it each time. So there you go. Now I'm only using one print statement, but you can have an entire body of code inside of it. So let's take these and copy paste them. So let's say for some reason you need to have all of this code in your program, but you wanna write it more than once, but that would be repetitive. So that's where functions are very handy. And there we go, we wrote each of those print statement 4 times each. So for now the function seems very simple, and this is a very basic use of it. So let's dive in deeper as to how we can write functions so that it becomes more useful. Now the parentheses, we can write variables inside of them. So let's say x, right? X is now a parameter for this function. Alright, and for you to understand this, I'm gonna have to show it to you. So print and then x, right? And when I call my function and then just run, it's gonna give me an error because this time I have a parameter, and it's just gonna tell me that there is one required positional argument that is missing, which is x, right? So this variable x that I put for the function we have to pass something as a value for x whenever we call this function, right? So here I have to pass a value for x. For example, let's say 5, and then I run. Well, it's gonna print 5. So essentially we can add variables inside of the function declaration, inside these parentheses, as many variables as we want, and we're gonna have to give them a value when we call the function. And this comes in handy because this variable can be used inside the body of this function. Now if I print x outside, for example, print x, this is gonna be an error because x is only defined inside of the function. Right, I created x here and it only exists inside the function, not outside the function, which is the same concept as for loops when we write for I in range of 0 to 5 and then print I. We are essentially creating a variable I and then printing it. This is, I believe, the last video's subject for loops, either the last video or the one before it. But yeah, I only exists inside this for loop, not outside of it. So this is the same case for the functions. X only exists in here. So now let's add a second variable, y for example, and this is how you add it. You just add a comma and then y, and then we have the same problem here again, missing one required positional argument, which is y. So let's go for this time a string which is high, and I'm gonna also print y, and there we go. Now let's use the parameters in a more functional way. So let's change this function a bit. Let's call it double my number, and we're gonna pass one number inside of it, and then inside we're gonna be printing x times 2. Alright, and now we're gonna make a for loop for I in range, or actually let's create a list. So let's go for list 1, because if I write list, the word list is a built-in component inside Python, so it might confuse the interpreter. So list 1 will be equal to 1, 5, 4, 3, 8, 9, and then for I in list, this will make I, my mistake, list 1, this will make I go through the entire list, and then instead of printing I, I'm gonna call my function double my number, which is I, and now let's run, and there we go. The number 1 gets doubled and then printed from this function, instead of having to write this inside of the for loop. So now I can make my function as complex as possible, and this will make it convenient because I only have to call the function for anything to happen. So this is another way parameters are used. This is how they are used in general. If you wanna manipulate your variables and whatever value you give it, but you don't want to repeat the code. The repetition of code is what we want to avoid as programmers. So this is how functions can contribute to that. Now the last thing I wanna teach when it comes to functions is how to return. So let's write this as my function again. Alright, let's pass a parameter again, which will be called x, and let's say actually let's keep it double my number and x, but this time I'm gonna return instead of printing. So what I'm gonna do is type return, and you will see this word return a lot whenever you're gonna be working with functions. The secret to mastering functions in general in programming is knowing how to use this return as well as the parameters. So here I'm gonna be returning x times 2, and what this will do is, let's say I wanna print, and then let's call our function double my number. I'm gonna give it 4, and now if I run, it's gonna give me 8. So essentially what we're doing is I'm calling the function double my number and I'm giving it 4. So when the Python interpreter arrives to this function, it's gonna give x the value of 4, which is the value I passed for this parameter. And now when what's happening here is the return statement. It will take this variable x and it's gonna double it, which is what we are doing. And what this return will do is take this value, which is essentially 8, and then you see where we call this function. This call will get substituted for 8. So this is basically the equivalent of writing print 8. This is essentially the same. This is what the return does. It will take this double my number, then parentheses 4. It will take this word and substitute it for this value. It's very important that you understand that this is being substituted. It's getting removed and then replaced with this value. So another way to clearly see it would be creating a variable. I will call it variable 1, and then this will be equal to double my number and then 9, for example. And then I'm gonna print variable 1, and if I run, this will become 18. So this is equivalent of writing print 18, and this is how the return works. Again, it takes whatever we called for the function and it's gonna substitute it for this value. It's gonna switch it for this value. So essentially this is the equivalent of typing variable 1 equal to 18. That's it. That's how the return works. So I'm gonna make a video about recursive functions, which is essentially how the return works in more detail, and then it's a bit advanced, so you don't have to worry about it. But that's about it for functions. Yeah, this is how we use functions. In the near future, I should be making a video about an example, a direct implementation of functions. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.